Hi, this video is all about the story of how movement feedback holography got created. Because after all, if you really want to understand something, you need to know about the process by which it was formed. So here we go. I am Brent Phillips. I am the founder and creator of the Awakening Dynamic System of Energy Healing and Higher Consciousness. And we're here with this video, which is number 9 of 9 in our series on movement feedback holography. Now, I'm not going to be giving a lot of technical details about how to do movement or explaining how it works. You got 8 other videos for that. This is the human story of how it was created. And so if you have no interest in that, skip the video, go straight to the description. We got some links there for you. Register for my live Healathon webinar, book a session with me, have your own experience. See for yourself that this is real, that this is powerful, truly life-changing. Now, if you're still with me, you're probably interested in the story, which you don't need to know. But again, you can't really fully understand something unless you know how it was formed or created. So here we go. Long story short, I learned this from my late mentor, Karl. And I'm sure most of you are already off in another tab Googling him. So let me make it easy on you. Karl with a K, Wolfe. And no, he was not Heinrich Himmler's chief of staff in Nazi Germany. If you Google Karl Wolfe, you may come up with that. Just another dude with the same name. My late mentor was never a Nazi as far as I know, and he was 1 year old when the war ended, so not him. And here's why. What you're going to find is unlikely to be much about his healing or energy work. This is what happened. When he was born, he died. And he went up to heaven and met God and saw the truth. And he was shown that he was a reincarnation of one of the Siddhas, which are the great immortal spiritual teachers, mostly from India. But he had decided that he wanted to bring these ancient and powerful spiritual teachings to a new audience in a new place that desperately needed it. So he chose to incarnate as a white man who grew up in upstate New York. And of course, after he was revived when he died, he forgot about it because he was a baby. But he said when he was about 14, 15, it started to come back. He remembered who he was and all the things he had known. And it was hard because at this time, it was the 1950s in upstate New York. It wasn't like there's a yoga studio on every corner and 15 law of attraction meetups. No, this was weird stuff to most of them. And so he kind of didn't understand it, so he ignored it. After high school, he joined the Air Force and ended up working in the space program. And what he told me was he was in the room when they got the first images of the dark side of the moon. Because I think it was Apollo 10 was the first one that went on the dark side of the moon. And what he said was, there's stuff there. There are artificial structures clearly built by intelligent beings. Cool, right? And because of that, his whole life, he was a big figure in the ancient alien community. Eric Von Daniken's work, there's the show on History Channel, etc. I love that stuff. It's cool. I think it's kind of brain candy, but it's cool. I've watched all those shows. And so he was a keynote speaker at these alien conventions. I saw him on the History Channel a bunch of times. And so if you Google him, that's what you're going to find. What we're going to talk about here has nothing to do with aliens or the moon or any of that. We're focused on the spiritual process. And so as cool as it is, we're going to ignore that. Just be warned. If you Google him, that's what you're going to find. The stuff about his energy work, his consciousness work is harder to find. So watch out. And so after the Air Force, he went and got a job at Siemens, which is a big engineering company. And what he told me was, by the time he was 27 years old, he was a vice president. He was the youngest vice president in the history of the company. And he had over 2,000 people working for him. And why did he make such a great ascent? It's simple. It was his energy. He's a frickin' master reincarnated. He was present, could connect to the quantum field. So everything broke his way. And he became a vice president, making a ridiculous amount of money with 2,000 people working for him in his 20s. And he worked there for a while. And he said one day he woke up and could not do it even one more day. And he drove into work, put in his notice, put all his things in a box, and that was that. And everyone at work thought he was nuts because he told me he put in his notice and resigned 3 weeks ahead of when his pension would vest. So he would have had a huge amount of money for life if he had stayed a few more weeks. But he goes, nope, it wasn't about the money. I couldn't stay one more day. So he put his stuff in a box, loaded it into his car, moved out of his apartment, drove cross country, and moved to San Francisco. And he said that when he got to San Francisco, one of the first things he had done was he went to a New Age bookstore and bought a book on transcendental meditation, which evidently was all the rage at the time. And he went home and followed the instructions, and boom, his kundalini blew wide open. And he was paralyzed. He couldn't walk for 3 years. And those that know the history of a lot of the spiritual teachers, that's not an uncommon thing. When they have a big kundalini experience, their students are trained for this, and oftentimes the master will collapse. And the students have to carry him and take care of him and feed him until he recovers. So it is a well-known aspect of consciousness jumping when you move to a higher level. This happens. But he was freaked out. He couldn't walk. And what he said was it took him 3 years working with a movement teacher to get the consciousness back in his body to learn to walk again. And he also said, hey, it's a good thing I was a vice president for a couple of years, so I had plenty of money in the bank, so I didn't starve. And so he learned movement because he couldn't walk. He had to get the consciousness back in his body. And it took 3 years, and he did it. And then it clicked in his head that that's what he was here for. So then he moved to Los Angeles and taught energy work for about 40 years, starting in the 70s. And I met him in 2008. Quite simply, he developed this system of using movement with feedback and the quantum field entrainment that was absolutely life-changing, delivered more powerful, more consistent results than anything out there. And you may have heard of a few of his clients. I'm only going to call out the notorious one, that one of his students was Nicole Simpson. And the week before she was murdered, he told everyone in the group, you have the shadow of death stalking you. Be really careful. You might die. And then she was murdered a few days later. Now, Karl didn't do it, but he could read the energy that she was in extreme danger. So I think it's really interesting. Of course, I met him in 2008, and I was at one of the lowest points of my life, and he helped me to turn it all around. And it's kind of funny that he admitted to me, he said, hey, Brent, when I first met you, you were more in your head, more disconnected than anybody I had ever worked with. And oh yeah, he started doing this full time in the 1970s. So it's still a great irony, something we laughed about, that perhaps the least capable, most in his head, least connected person ever ended up being the one to carry on the work. And so long story short, I studied and worked with him intensively. He retired from energy work in 2014, worked for a couple of years outside the industry, came back in 2016, and we co-taught our advanced sessions together for the next 3 years. I would help at his classes, he would help at mine. And I developed my Awakening Intensive program as an online version of the intensive life training that had helped me to make so many breakthroughs. And then he passed away unexpectedly in 2018. And I talked a little about this in the last video with the quantum field, but here's what happened. That we had a quantum field mastery, my level 4 training coming up. And normally we taught it together. He passed away 4 days before. And I was freaking out. Oh my gosh, I can't do this. I'm not ready. I can't do it without Karl. But over those 4 days, my guides came to me and showed me the missing pieces, specifically how to use the quantum field entrainment with the movement to create the biggest breakthroughs. So I'm pretty certain that Karl was behind that. That as soon as he passed, he's like, oh yeah, Brent still has a missing piece. So it was given to me. And I ran the seminar that weekend. And I hadn't just jumped one level in power and ability, I had jumped 2. That all of a sudden I had to take over. I had to be the master. And honestly, I didn't feel I was ready. I really felt I needed Karl for another 3 or 5 years. But that's not how life goes. But it was amazing that I was willing to step into that space. he showed up or someone showed up to support me and made it happen. And just so you know, when I had my first energy healing session with Terry O'Connell in 2003, when my elbow instantly healed, it was really a life-changing miracle. I was teaching and practicing that work within 18 months. Pretty easy for me to learn. The movement, the quantum field, I practiced for over 5 years before I ever did it publicly. And the first time I shook my hand so hard, I sprained both my wrists. So it does take time to learn this, but it was in 2014, after Karl retired, he gave me official permission. He said, Brent, I've never done this before, but I'm giving you full permission to teach and practice my work because you're the only one that's doing it right. At least that's what he told me. Again, I'm not slamming other people doing the work. I'm just saying I don't know all of you. Maybe you're awesome. I don't know. And so here we are. And it took me another 5 years after that to find the courage to make this YouTube video series. So anyhow, that is the story of Movement Feedback Holography. I developed this into my Awakening Dynamic system, which was released in 2014. And I created my own system for the primary reason that I could not be teaching and practicing Karl's work in someone else's system. I was one of the first certified masters in a very well-known system of energy healing. Not going to say the name, would rather not, whole long drama you don't need to know about. But this was different. This was so weird and so real that I was drawn to it because it totally changed my life. But it wasn't just me, all my students too. I went from like a 20 to 30% success rate with 2-gen techs to like an 80, 90% success rate. Night and day. And if you haven't done so yet, we're right at the end of the series. Hit like, hit subscribe. Please send this to your friends. YouTube needs to know you like it. There's a lot of garbage out there. If you want more cool stuff like this, like, subscribe, share. Put it on social media. Put it on Facebook. Awesome. And if you're interested in experiencing this for yourself, having your own experience, so you can see that this isn't just as advertised, it's actually better, hit the description. We got links to my live webinar, my 30 Days to Awakening program, stuff that'll totally change your life. So we're coming to the end of our series. And I hope you found it some combination of entertaining, educational, and transformational. But don't worry, I got a whole nother series coming very soon on consciousness shifting. And I'll look forward to seeing you there on YouTube, or maybe at one of my live Healathon webinars, or maybe in one of my intensive life-changing weekend trainings. Until then, this is Brent Michael Phillips signing off. Please take care and namaste.